Court is now in session. In today's case, we will examine the ethics of the Minnesota Twin study, a philosophical experiment exploring nature versus nurture by studying twins separated at birth. The question before this court is whether this research was a scientific breakthrough or a complete ethical disaster. The researchers are accused of violating core human rights in their quest for knowledge. Prosecution, you may begin.
Your Honor and member of the jury, this isn't just some case. It's about science. It's about human being separated by birth, studied like lab subject, and never being told the truth. The Minnesota Twin study was designed to explore the concept of heritability, how much of our personality, intelligence, and behavior is dictated by our genes versus our environment. But instead of a noble pursuit, they committed a profound violation of privacy and the participant's most basic human rights, specifically informed consent and the right to family. Years later, when the twins discovered their secret, the emotional damage was permanent and devastating. We are here to prove that the pursuit of knowledge should never ever come to the expense of humanity. We will prove that they are ethically guilty.
Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense acknowledges the genuine sensitivity and pain involved in this case, but we must keep in mind the time period during which the Minnesota Twin study took place. It was when the ethical guidelines were still developing. This research was driven by not cruelty, but by profound scientific curiosity. The desire to understand why we are the way we are. Their findings dramatically shaped how modern psychology views behavior, intelligence, and genetics, providing crucial data and power of nature that we use today. We cannot condemn the past with the full weight of the present knowledge. The defense will prove that the scientific contribution outweighs the ethical missteps of a bygone era.
Your Honor, the prosecution called Dr. Paris, a psychologist, to the stand, please.
The Minnesota Twin study was revolutionary. It showed how genetics have a huge influence on intelligence and behavior. However, I will admit that the ethical framework was grossly lacking. Informed consent was not properly obtained, and the participants were essentially deceived.
So, Dr. Price, you admit that the study by today's ethical standard clearly crossed the line?
Yes, by today's standards, it crossed lines we now consider unacceptable. The lack of awareness regarding the separation itself constitutes extreme emotional harm.
Objection! That's speculative! Dr. Pierce, would you also agree that those very ethical mistakes helped create today's ethical boundaries?
Overruled. Witness, please continue.
I will admit that it is true, but many of today's protections exist because of cases like this one.
Now, Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Mr. Stefano Solage, a family member, to the stand.
When my son found out he had a twin after decades, he broke down. He told me, how could they hide this from me? He was utterly shocked that he and his twin were used like test subjects, realizing emotions were like data points.
Mr. S., I understand your pain, but were you aware that this study changed psychology forever?
Change psychology? This destroyed and ruined my family.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Matthias Amboise, one of the participants, to the stand.
Finding out I had a twin after all those years felt unreal.
Mr. A, the core issue was not the ultimate outcome. It was the fundamental choice that was stolen from you, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I deserve to know.
Mr. A, you mentioned that meeting your twin helped you realize who you are. Can we truly say that you were totally harmed if the ultimate discovery provided a sense of meaning?
Even though the discovery was positive, I think the process was still hard. The fear that someone else controlled my life.
We would like to call Dr. Liam W., one of the original researchers, to the stand.
I can assure you, we weren't trying to harm anyone. Our goal was purely to understand whether personality is formed primarily by genetics or by environment. We believe our work would benefit the future generation.
Dr. W., will you say that value the abstract research of heritability more than personal well-being of the participant?
No, but we did underestimate how deeply the personal damage would become. We were blinded by the scientific significance of finding twins who share 100% of their genes, but 0% of the environment. It was a unique opportunity.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Lucas C., a modern psychological ethicist.
While the methodology was flawed, the data on heritability for IQ and temperament were crucial. It shifted funding towards genetic influence. The research, by separating the variables of nature and nurture so cleanly, was basically a blueprint that was impossible to achieve later. The scientific benefits is undeniable.
Dr. W., if you say the study was following the ethical of the time, why weren't the participants informed of the truth? Why would you lie to them and say that it wasn't an experiment and just separate them?
I felt that revealing the twin would bias the environmental factors and ruin the scientific integrity. It was a choice made for the data.
I have a question. Would you still justify your action like that if it were your kids being separate at birth without even their consent?
I don't know.
Dr. Pierce, do you agree that the findings advance psychology in ways that still benefit society today?
Yes, the data is valid, but valid data obtained through unethical means is the definition of a moral failure.
The court will now proceed to closing statements.
The prosecution rests with a singular truth: human being or not experiment. These family were betrayed, and the researcher may have discovered something about genetic inheritability, but at what cost? They also forgot something crucial about human decency. They deliberately violated informed consent and caused emotional harm, permanent emotional harm for the sake of data. Science without morality is simply chaos in disguise. We ask the court to find the Minnesota case study ethically guilty.
The defense is asking the court to see the bigger picture. Yes, the research team made mistakes, but the intentions were not cruel. They were driven by a desire for knowledge that is fundamental to our nature. It is because of studies like this one that psychology has evolved, proving the very ethical codes who we use to judge today. Do not erase monumental scientific progress for the guilt of the past. Find them scientifically successful and not ethically culpable in the contents of their time.
The court has heard the evidence regarding the pursuit of knowledge versus the protection of human dignity. The question of informed consent and emotional harm are grave. However, the study's contribution to understanding heritability and the fundamental nature versus nurture question is undeniable. Before the final verdict, I must ask, could the researchers have achieved similar clarity on the genetic component if they had simply waited for the twins to find each other naturally?
No, Your Honor. The environmental variable would have been contaminated by public knowledge and expectations. The integrity of the data was tied to their separation.
Yes, Your Honor. No scientific finding is worth destroying a whole family. The end do not justify the mean in this situation.
The court concludes that the Minnesota Twins study is ethically guilty of violating the principles of informed consent, protection from harm, and deceit. However, it is also ruled scientifically influential in advancing our understanding of psychology and the concept of heritability. The researchers are condemned by today's standards, but the science is preserved for the future. Court dismissed.